of colors.
Post of colors.
Detail. Forward. March. Prepare to post colors. Ready? Post. Read cover. Present. Out. Order. Out. About face. Mark time. Mark.
So, we are gathered together to honor and remember Chief Roy Lane. Some of us have known him through the years. He has been a man of dignity, of honor, who has mentored and challenged, cared for us. The chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. When Roy and I talked about what kind of scripture he would like to have, and we've been going through this now for 7 months, and he said, well, I like that one, but not so much. And this one, not so much. But we came to this one, Micah 6:8. What shall I come before the Lord with, and with what will I bow down to God on high? He told me, he told you, oh man, what is good? What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? Let us pray. Father in heaven, we gather today and our hearts are sorrowed. Heaven is rich. Roy is gathered with those who have gone before, and there is celebration. We are at loss. We grieve. But we pause now as these who have assembled and ask you to be with us, that you would comfort hearts. That you would draw this precious family to your chest, that they would hear the sound of your heartbeat, even as Roy did. That though we are in a time of quiet and of grief and of sorrow, there is within us that spark that reminds us of your great love that came reaching to us, and how you touched Roy's heart, his life, and you drew him, and you've drawn us at this time to remember you and him. Thank you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. As I did my reflections on these verses, what does it mean? What does the Lord require but to do justice? To do justice means to make a decision. We've all known what it means to go to court and seen a judge make a decision, but Roy was one who made decisions among us. How about that, kids? Did he ever make decisions related to how late you should stay out? No, okay, RC says yes. The girl said no. He never told us what to do. He made decisions. He would render a verdict. He made decisions about the men and women that worked for him. He made decisions. He did justice. It says that we should love kindness. Kindness is more than just being good. And if you'll forgive me just a moment for the preacher part of me, goodness relates to something called compassion. Compassion relates to something that you women all understand. It's the nurturing womb that is there, meets every need of that growing infant. Roy met every need as it came up. I'll tell you this as a counselor. There are introverts and there are extroverts. We have extroverts among us. Then they talk and they laugh and they carry on and they tell jokes, and it's a wonderful thing. Introverts take in a little bit of information and then they get really quiet. Some of us remember the old E.F. Hutton commercials. And the man would say, well, my broker is E.F. Hutton, and everyone would grow silent. And I've seen that. When Roy was ready to say, this is what it is, there was quiet. And then Micah goes on and says, and to walk humbly with God. To be humble is to be lowly, is to show humility in one's walk. It is to be gentle, not self-aggrandizing. Roy was one of those who took time in his life to figure out, how is it that I got here? And he loved to go places. Well, you see, you're not an accident. Roy and I talked. You are not an accident of a creation of a big bang that happened. You and Roy were an act of a loving God. He wired you exactly the way he wanted you to be wired. Gifts and abilities, challenges, attributes. And once we figure out how we got here, then we need to say, what is my purpose? What is my purpose in life? And I remember in those last days, he would hold my hand and he'd say, I know what's happening. I know my purpose. And I came here to Cortez to do my purpose. You kids, grandkids, how he loved you. Chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever, and then to love his family with all his heart, mind, body, and soul. And then go to work. You are the second family. Sorry, men and women, you're the second family. He loved these guys first, right? Katie said he always loved you best, right? And then R.C. said, well, anyhow, we'd go on. And so Roy found his purpose. He wanted to be a teacher. He wanted to be a coach. He wanted to do those things. But he said, no, God had this for me to do. And he did it with all of his might. So to ask, how do I do my purpose? Well, he learned to do his purpose. He practiced it. And then when he became a leader, which was part of his purpose, he mentored. He lifted up. He challenged. He held people accountable, but it was always towards the end of them being a better person. Then the fourth question we all ask is, and where will I go when I die? And I reminded him of John 14. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions, many abodes, many resting places. I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you will be also. And he goes, that's it. I'm on my way. He was a man of faith. I knew Roy for 24 years plus. Roy faced some hard times. I talked to him about the man Caleb in the Old Testament as Israel was taking over the Promised Land, and there were giants in that land. And Caleb said, I'll take the mountains. I'll take on the giants. Now give me the hill country the Lord has promised to this day. You yourselves heard that the Anakims, that's the giants, those are the 15-foot tall guys, were in their cities, and their cities were large and fortified, but the Lord help me, I will drive them out. And Roy said, I have faced giants. Three times he faced cancer and defeated it. Some of us remember when Claxton died. That was a giant. He said, Dave, that's the hardest time in my life. He faced giants and he defeated them. He won. This is a man, and I've had some of you say to me, well, Dave, where was Roy spiritually? I'll tell you where he's at spiritually. He's in heaven, in the place that Jesus prepared for him. If you didn't have the integrity to ask him to his face, I'm telling you today, I did. For 24 years, he said, yes, I believe. And I can't wait to get there. The last days when he was fighting this last giant, the verses out of Matthew, come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That's it. Dave, that's it. And then Katie came in and said, Dad, you want to listen to country music? And he turned on country music, and you ran an errand, and I sat there with Roy, and it was just, I thought he had drifted off to sleep. And so I was singing country songs, that was on the music, and Katie came back and said, you all right, Daddy? And he said, yep, I'm all right. And I go, wait, he's been awake this whole time? Listening to Willie and I sing? You know times when Roy laughed, and I'm sure he laughed then. Before one of his trips out of town, I gave him a medallion that said, Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And he held it. And to the kids, grandkids, to those of you who loved him, the Apostle Paul, an extroverted evangelist, said this, but Roy, the lover of men, the one who said to his kids, I don't have much money to leave you, but I've left you a good name, right? And how do you get a good name? By being one of honorable behavior, by having moral courage, by having integrity. And that's what we remember today, a man of integrity, a man of honor, a man of love, of honor, of loyalty. And so I would challenge all of us, but especially Tony and Katie and R.C. Paul said, I've fought the good fight. But before I go, he says, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice. And the God of all peace will be with you. I believe that Roy demonstrated all of these things: to do right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with his God. We've invited you here, and later on there will be a time of greeting the family for a few minutes. But now there are some other folks who want to share their touches of Roy's life upon them. Be gracious.
Well, thank you all for coming. I want to say what an honor it is to be asked to talk. So I appreciate that. My name is Andy Brock, and I've been the patrol lieutenant under Chief Roy Lane for the past 11 years. You know, or you will hear, or you have heard, that Chief Lane was a remarkable man and leader, and that's all true. Roy Charles Lane Sr. was born September 26, 1944 in Muleshoe, Texas. The youngest of three, having a brother Bill, a sister Brianna. Roy is the father of 4 and the grandfather of 10. Roy fought cancer starting in his late teens. He was not supposed to survive at that time. His family was advised that if they wanted to spend some time with him or have a family vacation, they better pull him out of school. Roy made all kinds of medical publications as he became one of only a couple survivors at that time of non-lymphoma Hodgkin's cancer. Roy graduated from Aztec High School and went on to attend Northern Arizona University for 2 years. Then, when he was 21, he followed in his father's footsteps, and he went into law enforcement, starting his career on January 15, 1966, in Winslow, Arizona. And just a quick note about his father, Charles W. Lane. He was a law enforcement officer starting his career in San Juan County, New Mexico in 1949, and he died in the line of duty in 1992 while working in Arizona for the Navajo County Sheriff's Office, after 43 years of law enforcement. In Winslow, Roy started as a dispatcher and quickly went to the road. As he tells it, Winslow was a logging town with a train station. He talked about a lot of bars, and it seemed like a pretty rough place. At that time, when dispatch received a call, they would flip a switch and a light would come on in town, and the officers would know that they needed to go to a call box and call into dispatch to find out what the call was. Well, while Roy was still with a training officer, the light went on, and he went to its call box, and they said there was a bar fight in progress about 3 blocks from the police station. So Roy and his training officer went to the bar. Roy runs into the bar, and he handcuffs somebody, the bad guy, pulls him out of the bar, and the bar crowd wasn't going to have any of that, and so they followed him out. As he got out of the bar, he looked back and he saw his training officer jumping in the patrol car, and the patrol car sped off. So Roy is sitting there, and he backs up for 3 blocks with his suspect in tow, keeping the crowd in front of him until he got to the police station. But he didn't ever stop. When he did get to the police station, he found out that his training officer had turned his gear in, had resigned, and had already gone home. The other thing that happened in Winslow is he put in for the chief of police position in Holbrook, Arizona. So Roy had been working a graveyard shift, as he tells it, and so early in the morning the phone rang, and it woke him up out of his short sleep that he had. The voice on the other end said that he was the mayor of Holbrook, and he was going to offer Roy the chief of police position. You know what? Roy just woke up. It was early in the morning. He didn't really think he was going to get the position. He figured it was one of his fellow officers playing a gag on him, so he gave him some unkind remarks and then soon hung up on him. A short time later, the duty sergeant came by and knocked on the door and woke him up again and explained to him that he had just hung up on the real mayor of Holbrook and that the job offer was legitimate. Roy talks about that being one of the most embarrassing interviews he ever had afterwards, but he did get the job. While he was the chief of police in Holbrook, he was able to go to the FBI National Academy, session 109. Roy talks about Holbrook and that position. He said he believes he learned in Holbrook, the things that he learned in Holbrook were invaluable for the rest of his career. He held that chief's position for 7 years until March 9th of 1981, when when he was hired, as chief of police in Cortez, Colorado. And he's been here ever since. Roy is the longest tenured chief in the state of Colorado. He's received numerous awards and accolades for his achievements and contributions to law enforcement. His low point would have been on May 29, 1998, when Cortez officer Del Claxton was killed in the line of duty. And during that time, it was the largest manhunt in the history period. And they were law enforcement personnel in and out of our department. It was kind of overtaken by everybody. But there was never a question of who was in charge. Roy was always in charge. And although he was weathered a little bit, he was able to get us through that horrible time. Roy had 54 years of law enforcement experience, and that's incredible. 45 of those years he was chief of police, and 38, almost 39 of those years, he was our chief of police. In recognition of his service, Colorado Governor Jared Polis has proclaimed December 20th forevermore as Chief of Police Roy Lane Day. He has his own day. That's amazing. He was also embedded in the community. In addition to his position as Chief of Police, without fanfare or seeking notoriety or padding his resume, he quietly served others. He was a founding board member of the Bridge Shelter and was on countless other boards. He rang the bell for the Salvation Army. He flipped pancakes for the hospice annual fundraiser. He was regularly seen at football games, at basketball games, and recently he became a wrestling enthusiast. 3 weeks ago we were talking to him, and we were talking about the high school basketball team, and he knew almost every player by name. Roy C. Lane passed away, surrounded by his family, on December 20th, 2019, at the age of 75. Roy served his community in countless ways, and by doing so was able to be part of some amazing accomplishments. But what he was most proud of was his kids and his grandkids. He reported accomplishments that they made, even some trials they went through almost every week to us. We are ever grateful that this man that loved his family and community so much had that same love for his department, individually and as a whole. His caring will be one of the many things that he's remembered for. As people wonder how we will get along without him, I'll tell you that he will be missed. But because of his caring, his dedication, and his loyalty, by his example, we have learned from one of the finest and have been blessed to have worked under such a remarkable man. Because of him, we will be just fine. I would end by thanking each of you for sharing your father and your grandfather with us, allowing us to feel like we were a second family. Thank you.
I would also like to begin by saying that it is an honor to be able to speak here today as we remember such a special man. A man who many, including myself, have looked up to as a person, a mentor, and a leader. Chief Lane always created an environment that made the Cortez Police Department such a special place to work. An environment that can be best described with one word, and that is family. Everyone who has ever worked for Chief Lane knows that there is one thing that he demanded, and that was honesty. This was a testament to him being a person of high moral character. This also demonstrated and promoted the most important character trait in the law enforcement profession. Chief Lane was a proud father and grandfather, and it's easy to see why. He loved his children and grandchildren, and it showed as he spoke of them and their accomplishments often. As many of you know, Chief Lane loved baseball, and he loved his Cubs. I will always remember the joy it brought him when his Cubs won the World Series, and the front page from the Chicago Tribune that he proudly hung in his office. We shared a love for the game of baseball, and I will miss our talks and banter about the game. I always enjoyed hearing stories that Chief Lane would share from his career, and as you can imagine, with 54 years in the profession, he had some interesting ones. With these stories, we laughed, learned, and heard how things have changed over the years. It was an honor to work for and with Chief Lane. I will always be grateful for everything he has done for me and my family, for the Cortez Police Department, and for our community. I will always strive to be the type of leader and the type of person that he was.
Notes. So it is an honor. Thank you. You told me that Roy wanted me up here. I'm thinking, you got a couple hours? How do you say goodbye to a friend in one afternoon in 5 minutes? You can't. But is it really a goodbye? Today I stand in front of you, deep hole in the heart. No different than everybody else. But we are here to celebrate the life of one incredible man. And his heart was full of compassion. We say that the hour of death cannot be forecast. But when we say this, we imagine that hour as placed in an obscure and distant future. It never occurs to us that this, or it has any connection with the day already begun, or that death could arrive this same afternoon, which is so certain, and which has every hour filled in advance. I was called December 20th this year, and I heard the news of my good friend, my mentor, my brother in blue, Chief Roy Lane. He did shape my view in law enforcement and many other things, and I found out that he had passed away. My condolences to the family and the friends of Chief Roy Lane on this tragic loss. May God provide you with comfort and strength to overcome this difficult time. I've never met someone as impressive, smart, and as grounded as Chief Roy. We've talked about different areas that he's been involved in. When I first really spent a lot of time with Chief Roy Lane was in 1998. He called for help to chase down the terrorist that killed his officer. And he also needed help to protect the family and friends of that community. that were going to attend that officer's funeral. During those gloomy weeks to follow, I spent a lot of time with my brother. I saw the pain that Chief was carrying. I also saw the love, compassion, and concern he had for all of his employees, his family, his friends, and community. He told me he would not rest until those criminals were found. It took a toll on him. I remember him calling me with excitement and closure when they found the last terrorist. He was full of joy and full of anger. The search had ended, but the pain continued on. While we were originally brought together for law enforcement purposes, I soon began to learn from his views and perspectives and his wealth of knowledge that soon became a fundamental for my understanding of this world. And to top it off, he always had a ready smile for everyone. I talked to another chief today that couldn't make it here, unfortunately, and he reminded me of a story. You know, all the chiefs sit around and tell stories, right? So Roy started telling us he's an interim chief now in the city of Cortez. He's been doing it for several months. And he told me he learned so much about sewer trucks and sewer lines that a man could ever want to know. He learned so much, and yet I said, why don't you just give that up? Why don't you just go back to being chief? He says, because the city needs help, and that I'm here to help them. As much as I don't want to learn any more about sewer trucks and sewer lines, I'm still here to help the city. That's the kind of guy he was. Roy and I could talk about anything. He never judged me. In fact, he always had a better story than what I had. And whatever particular situation I brought up, we would laugh about it. Then he'd give me more advice. He was a fellow law enforcement brother. He was my teacher, a mentor, and a confidant. Most of all, he was my friend. He touched my life in so many ways, and I'll carry his spirit until we meet again. Thank you, Chief Roy Lane, for your friendship and kindness. Thank you for your dedication, love, and service to your family, to the communities in your city, to your county, to the Southwest Colorado, and to everybody who had the honor to meet you. You carved your name on hearts, not tombstones. The legacy is etched into the minds of others, and the stories they share about you. Rest in peace, my brother. We have the watch from here.
Dad was always so generous. He was committed to his children, his grandchildren, and to the police department. He was always the calm in a storm. He had a way of moving you forward, regardless of the situation. He'd say, "We'll figure this out." It always made you feel better, because you know he meant it. He was always going to be there. Oh, and how he loved his grandchildren. He had the ability to develop a unique relationship with each one. He always made time to encourage and support them. And it didn't matter what it was. Christmas programs, science fair, sports. He didn't care. He was always their biggest fan. When my boys were in preschool, they were across from the police department, and we would visit them almost every afternoon. They would make these art projects from his business cards, tapes, paper clips. He was so proud of them. They taped him to his desk one day, and they asked him, "Grandpa, don't ever take these down." He didn't. That was 15 years ago. When my dad said it, he meant it, and he lived it. While he was always very proud of all of us, we were most proud of him and what he did for us. I grew up in Flagstaff. He drove out 4 hours one way just to see me to the prom. And it didn't matter to him that he probably had 30 minutes with me. He made a point to be there, to share in my experiences. And I can guarantee you, everyone's got their Roy Lane story, where he put his needs aside and made sure you were taken care of. He was more than a father, a grandfather, chief. He was a friend to us and to this community. We were proud we were able to share him with you, so he could live his dream, a lifetime of service to us all. Thank you, Dad. We love you and we miss you. And don't worry, together we will figure this out.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. It means the world to our family, and it's a testament to the way my dad lived his life. So over the last few months, since we got the news, I've thought a lot about what I would say at this point in time when I had to. And I could never find the perfect words to truly say what my dad meant to our family. Then I had the realization that there was no perfect words. There was no perfect thing I could say. But I will tell you, every time I think about him, I think of three things: love, loyalty, and leadership. You see, he loved his children. And Katie will try to tell you that she was the favorite, and I'm not 100% sure that's true. But she gets to speak last, so I had to say it before she got up here. From coaching Little League Baseball when I was young to traveling all over the place when I was playing basketball to driving I don't know how many hours when I graduated the fire academy when I was in the military. He was always there, always. He always made sure that after my daughter ran a track meet, he was the first person that called. How'd she do? Whether my son's traveling, playing basketball, or at basketball camps, or wherever he's at, the first person that calls is him. How did he do? He loves his family. He loves you guys. I want you guys to know that. Up until the very last days, he was worried about you, Andy. He was worried about you, Ryan. He was worried about the department. One of his greatest joys in life was his ability to say that he was the police chief for the Cortez Police Department. He loved you guys. You guys truly were a huge part and were just as much family as we were at times. Loyalty. He was the most loyal man I've ever met in my life. He would only buy Ford trucks. He would only buy them from Lucky. You couldn't put a gun to his head and tell him to buy a truck somewhere else. He'd have just rather been shot. He loved his Cubs. You have to be loyal to love a team that loses for over 100 years. But one of the greatest joys in my life was being able to take him to Wrigley Field for the first time. When we walked up that ramp and we walked onto that and we could see the field, his eyes lit up like I've never seen before. To this day, I'm 100% sure that's why the Lord had me move to Illinois, was so we could get to Wrigley Field. He was loyal to his hairdresser even. He'd probably kill me if he knew I called her a hairdresser. But he was loyal. He would never go anywhere else. He was a loyal man. And that's a hard quality to find. And he was a leader. Man, was he a leader. I've learned so much over the years of just sitting back and watching him lead. At times he was soft-spoken. At times he dealt with it with humor. At times he dealt with it with a, hey, you need to come to my office. And I've been that, hey, you need to come to my office. And when you get that, it's not a good thing. Especially when it's accompanied by a, can you shut the door behind you, please? But his love and his loyalty made him the leader that everybody loved. I want to end with this, is that he would not want us to be here today to mourn him. He would say to every single person in this place, don't mourn me. This is not a mourning event. This is a celebration of a man who loved his family, who loved his police department, and who loved his community. There's a saying that the Associated Firefighters of Illinois has when a firefighter has fallen. And it says to honor, to cherish, to remember, to salute with overwhelming pride for you, my comrade, I will. We ask how we move forward. We move forward by honoring him and cherishing him and remembering him. And with overwhelming pride, we celebrate his life.
I want to get personal with all of you and tell you what my dad meant for me. In this, all I want to do is honor him. It's hard for me to stand up here and put into words what he meant to me. There are no words great enough to describe it. He was my person, my foundation, my peace. I loved him so much. He was the absolute best dad. He was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of man. His love was unconditional and consistent. He was the type of dad that was always present. He was at every event, big or small, in my life, and he never passed up a chance to remind me how proud he was of me. Recently, he was at the hospital here in Cortez getting his blood drawn. It was a day I had to work, so I dropped by while he was in the lab just to say hi. As I was walking away, he turned to the people in the waiting room that he didn't even know, and he said several times, "That's my baby girl. She's a nurse here." I owe you everything, Dad. I am where I am, and I am who I am today because of you. Through your example, you have taught me how to love selflessly, how to be compassionate, generous, and courageous. Most importantly, you have taught me how to love myself and to know my self-worth. You are the best example of the qualities that I looked for in a husband. I look at Javi and I see the husband and the man that he's grown into, and I see that he has so many of the same qualities that you had. As most of you know, through personal experience, my dad had a great sense of humor. He could always make me laugh, even when I was in the worst of moods. Thanks to you, Daddy, the twins know every word that rhymes with poop and frequently walk around calling people poopy, snoopy, loopy. Let me tell you, that's a fun one to explain in public. One of the last few days before he passed, I was in and out of his room checking on him, and I guess maybe hovering a little too much, because he opened his eyes and he said, "I'm gonna start calling you Creepy Katie." He knew that's what I needed in that moment to ease my aching heart and to make me smile. I'm scared to live in a world without my dad, but I'm clinging to the hope and the faith that one day I will see him again. Until then, Daddy, I promise to carry on your love for the Cubs, always by Ford and only from Lucky, although probably not as frequently as you. Occasionally listen to country music, and last, my blood will always run blue. This song was my dad and I for as long as I can remember, and what I wouldn't give for one more dance in the kitchen. Daddy, this is for us. Love your baby girl.
Henry David Thoreau said, "Most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave never having sung their song." Roy sang his song to Katie, but always with a melody for all of us. The Apostle Paul said, "I have fought the good fight." You can hear Roy saying this too. "I have finished the race, I have kept the faith, and now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who long for his appearing." There was a while ago, we asked some folks to write letters, just that Roy could have that information. And what did people think? And in our last conversation, he said, Dave, I didn't know. I was appreciated. Thank you for appreciating him today. I believe, again, as the writer of the book of Hebrews says, we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, those who have gone on before. He might be looking down, smiling, going, what's all the fuss? What a man. Let me say a prayer. Father in heaven, you are gracious, kind, tender, compassionate, and you love us so much that you sent Roy to walk among us, to father these children, to love on these grandchildren, to care for all of us. He was your representative in this time and in this place, and we are so grateful. You are great and we are small. You are infinite and we are finite. You are everything and we are small. And yet you love us so much you bend down to hear the sound of our tears as they strike the ground. Amen. We have a few remaining activities and then I will dismiss.
C1 Cortez. C1 Cortez. This is the last call for C1. Cortez Police Chief Roy Lane. Chief Roy Lane is out of service after 54 years of dedicated police service. Although you are gone, you will never be forgotten. You have influenced many people with unending compassion, respect for others, and service in law enforcement and the community. But evening and at peace, sir, for the men and women you once loved, will have you watch from here. Chief Royalty Wayne, end of watch, December 20th, 2019. Time out, 17:04.
We would ask that you remain seated until the family and the guard retires. At that time, the family will receive you back in the room for an hour, hour and a half, just for a short time. Just remain as you are. Thank you.